Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jummah Mubarak to you all. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu. Wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. All praise due to Allah, from whom we seek help and forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil of our own souls and from those of our bad deeds. Whomsoever Allah guides will never be led astray. Whomsoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. Bear witness that there is no God except Allah, the one who has no partner. And bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad is Allah's true servant and messenger. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. Allah tells us in the Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. That, O ye who believe, be mindful of Allah. Be mindful of Allah in the way that Allah deserves, and do not die except in a state of full submission to Allah. Allah tells us in the Quran, يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. That, O ye who believe, or O humanity, be mindful of your Creator. Be mindful of the Creator and who created you from a single soul, and from that soul created its mate. And through both, Allah spread countless men and women across the earth. And be mindful of Allah, in whose name you appeal to one another, and honor your ties of kinship. Surely Allah is ever watchful over you. Allah tells us in the Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. That, O ye who believe, be mindful of Allah, be cognizant of Allah, and say that which is right, and Allah will bless your deeds for you and forgive you of your sins. And whoever obeys Allah and the Messenger of Allah has truly achieved a great triumph. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. I pray that may Allah open my chest and make easy for me this task, and loosen the knots of my tongue, that these words may be understood. And glory be to you, Allah, glory be to you alone, that we have no knowledge except that which you have taught us. Verily it is you who is the all-knowing, the all-wise. Ameen. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jummah Mubarak to you all. It's a blessing to be here with you towards the end of yet another year. And oftentimes when we come to a time like this, we see a lot of different festivities. We see a lot of things around in the society that mark a joyous occasion, that mark, celebration of sorts, apart from many of your neighbors and communities that might be observing, their Christmas holidays and other religious festivities. You also see the general society kind of celebrating in that same aspect of the new year approaching, and a lot of themes around joy, or a lot of themes around family, a lot of themes around community, a lot of themes around this kind of festivity. And the reality of also should not be dismissed, that just as much as this is a time of celebration and festivity for so many of our neighbors and so many people, so many of us that may be in the season as well, this is also a time of profound isolation for a lot of people. It's also a time for a profound amount of grief for a lot of people, that when images are projected of on TV screens and in ads and all these different things of people shopping with their families and coming together for dinner with their families, everybody's in the holidays surrounded by their loved ones or whatnot, that for many people in our society, many people, who may be our neighbors, many people who may be us in our communities, might be the only people that gather at their dinner table, might be the only people that are there at home, and have been the only one who is there after their family and their loved ones who they used to gather with have passed on. The people who they were with around previously might not be there. And oftentimes it's overlooked how this period of time can be, and often is, a time of profound grieving, profound isolation, profound difficulty for many people. But at the same time, how it's sometimes glossed over by this kind of consumerist way of just seeing what the purpose of the holidays is, or what our objective for the holidays is get this item that's on sale today because it's the only time it'll be on sale. But reality of it being it'll probably be on sale the week after the holidays are over, and so on and so forth. But the focus that society often pitches for what are where we should be kind of directing our efforts and our energy and our resources and all the things that we have at our disposal is oftentimes purchasing things and investing in things that don't really have a deep, meaningful connection to us. It's just kind of what's a trend, what's a fad, what's something that is projected as a need to have, or it'll go good with whatever you've got or whatever it may be, but it's the hottest item to purchase, and overlooks this aspect, and because it feels like, oh, this is a shared experience. Everybody is doing this. Everybody is shopping right now. Everybody's going out and doing all these different things. But in reality, seeing that couldn't be further from the truth with respect to seeing that many people might be heightened in this aspect of purchasing and doing all this stuff and kind of getting swept into the wave of the holiday season. But in tandem with that, in parallel with that, there's a profound amount and a growing amount of people that are experiencing a deep amount of isolation, deep amount of difficulty during this particular season, because especially when you see these images of your loved ones, of different people that are projected there, when you've experienced a loss, when you've experienced any type of tragedy, or you've experienced the death of a loved one, or any type of broken relationship, or whatever it might be, this could be a time of grieving. This could be a time of really feeling this more intensely than anything else. And what I wanted to lift up for us today was with respect to the approach our Prophet ﷺ, peace and blessing be upon him, had in the aspect of caring for other people in the sense, and what we might draw from it. As we approach these holidays, we approach this season that increases the messaging of celebrating with your family, celebrating with your loved ones, and making it feel like it's a uniform experience, and being able to be a little bit more mindful as to not just tending to our own needs, but tending to the needs that are those of our neighbors, whether they state them or not, but just to be aware of them. That it's interesting that as we look at ourselves towards the end of this year, coming towards the end of the Gregorian calendar year, we think about this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where Abu Hurairah related that Allah descends every night to the lowest heaven when 1/3 of the first part of the night is over, and says that I am the Lord. I am the Lord who is there to supplicate me, that I will answer them, and who is there to beg of me, that I will grant them, and who is there to beg a forgiveness from me, so that I will forgive them, and continues like this until the day breaks. That Allah draws to us at this point when our day is at its end, when it's kind of concluded in the sense. You can think of it as being like, from a literal sense, it's the start of a new day, technically, since it's in the night and going there. But just thinking about that, this is kind of the tail end of like when we're awake, and tail end of when we're kind of winding our activities down. But when it descends to that lowest, descend to the lowest heaven, but towards the end of the night, towards the end of the day per se, it's the beginning of that night. And thinking about in our context here that we're kind of really at that tail end of going to the end of the actual year, going to the end of the calendar year, and living into this example, seeing that Allah draws nearest to us towards this latter part of the night, that latter part of time, and the beginning of the next day that's there. And to what extent are we, in a sense, modeling, or can we show up then for our fellow creation? That if Allah is giving us an example of being in the space of descending to the space and being close to the creation, whether metaphorically or in another sense speaking, at this particular part of the night, in what way can we as humanity descend closer to, or come closer to, become more grounded with our fellow creation towards the end of the year, towards the tail end of the year. And no better example has been given to us than that of our Prophet ﷺ, that we can take heed at this particular moment rather than getting lost up in the semantics of whether we say Merry Christmas or not, or whether we have like, what do we agree on and disagree on, all these different things, or the politics of what might be coming up, to be actually able to see the deeper wounds that our fellow neighbors and society are experiencing, that get exacerbated during this time because of just how things are at a bit of a rush, that your expenditures are at an all-time high, that you have these different kinds of consumerism that is kind of running rampant. You have different kinds of messaging that is running rampant. You have people feeling these degrees of isolation at a higher degree. All these different things being kind of compounded into this particular month, that we can kind of see beyond some of the superficial differences or disagreements that might be there, to really see what are the things that are aching, not just people of one particular faith, but people in this entire society. And uh, to lift up how the Prophet ﷺ would approach the care of human beings is important for us, because we sometimes get dissuaded by certain issues or certain things that may affect how we approach something, or may, resist us from or restrict us from being able to approach, because we just don't feel like it's worth our energy. But to think about the nature of the Prophet ﷺ as someone who was known in his society before he even became a prophet as a Sadiq and al-Amin, the person who was truthful, the person who was trustworthy, that he was known as someone who was not just there for people's material possessions and being able to be trusted with their material possessions, and being able to take them to far off lands and be able to return them safely and whatnot, but also to emotional needs, to be a confidant, to be a person who was an arbiter, a person who would handle the disputes in between people. We have the famous incident of, the Hajar Aswad, the black stone, and setting it back when there's a dispute in the community about who should be kind of the person to settle this. Thinking about that, this was a person that people could lean on even before his prophethood. But thinking about as well, what is the significance that our faith tells us, not just with respect to how our Prophet ﷺ was living this image and walking this aspect of empathy, support, and empowerment for people, but in what ways can we see that these are values that are told not to just be exclusively to him, but for all Muslims that walk in that footstep, that walk in that tradition, that Allah tells us in the Quran that, cooperate with one another in goodness and righteousness, and don't cooperate with one another in sin and transgression. Be mindful of Allah, be aware and cognizant of Allah. And our Prophet ﷺ adds that Allah is engaged with helping the worshippers, helping this person, that as long as that person is also engaged with helping their brother or their sister or their sibling, that Allah has injunction upon us that, we have a right, that Allah has a right over us, as just as we have, our creation has a right over us as well. Our fellow neighbors have a right over us, and how are we exercising that? That Allah has this right to be worshipped and to be given, these dues and all of these different things that are asked of us, but also the people around us, the creation, the rest of humanity, they have a right upon us too. And how do we fulfill those rights? That when we think about this element of being able to show up for our fellow community members, in what ways can we do that? That's tangible. And our Prophet ﷺ leaves a example for us as we navigate this particular time, to be able to go through the holidays, go through any season, any type of time, and be able to not just model and walk this care, but also be able to be observant of the things that are not being said, the things that are not being lifted up, the things that go beyond the societal messages. And our Prophet ﷺ had lifted up for us as well that, no believer consoles their sibling at a time of calamity, except that Allah, that, glory be to Allah, that Allah will dress that person in noble garments on the day of resurrection. That no believer is not just consoling their sibling at this time, that if they experience a loss, they experience a tragedy, not just pat on the back and saying, I'm here for you, here's a plate of food, like, sorry about your loss. But when you think about consoling the person at a time of calamity, being with somebody at a time of immense grief and difficulty, it's a heavy lift. It's not something that you can just put a band-aid over or just solve with a purchase or a gift or whatnot. It requires a lot of presence, it requires a lot of energy, and it requires a lot of time. It's not something that is just a one and done type of deal. And so thinking about that, these things don't go unseen. They may be unseen in our society, but they don't go unseen by Allah and where it actually counts. So just for us to kind of take away, what are some of the ways that our Prophet ﷺ showed up for other people and not just made their day, but showed his care for other people, especially those who had gone through some kind of difficulty, those who had experienced a kind of a loss. And the Prophet ﷺ's nature was that of being one that was not inward facing. There's related that anyone who would come to him would never leave without having something fulfilled, or without having their need at least met. They would never leave empty-handed per se. And even if he didn't have something to give, he would at least give of good word, of good advice, or something that would be of a benefit to them. So nobody ever took their chalice or their cup to the Prophet except that they left with it somewhat full in this aspect. And not just a concern given for his family members and for the people around him, but he also give readily consoling his fellow companions, his neighbors, his people who are the people who are needy, the people who are even children, people who are widowed, the orphans, people on the margins. And this example pervaded for those who succeeded him in leadership, his khulafa that followed. There's related examples of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anh, who would go in the night to be able to see who is what are the people saying? What are, who is in need, and being able to go feed those who are in need, and those who may be overlooked by the state, those who might not be able to make it. And thinking about this type of example being set to where we are in a society that will oftentimes insulate us and make us feel that what space we have, what place we've got, as long as we've got what we are seeing on that TV screen or in that ad, as long as we've got that, we've made it. We're good. But doesn't necessarily involve us thinking about how do we go outside our comfort zone and address the points of pain and the points of difficulty for other people and being able to be mindful of their needs. So some things to lift up of how the Prophet ﷺ would approach these different situations. And it's important to note that the Prophet ﷺ was very dynamic in his approach. The Prophet ﷺ was not monotonous, was not very monolithic in terms of his caring approach, and especially for people who were of the brokenhearted, the people who were in the margins, the people who needed that care and consolation. And thinking about if the Prophet ﷺ was in these holiday times and in which space he's tending to those who are of the brokenhearted, the isolated, the grieving, how would he do that? The Prophet ﷺ, first and foremost, among many other things. He was also known to be somebody who would have a dignified sense of humor, a dignified sense of lightening the mood, that the Prophet ﷺ, would have a lightheartedness to him in the situations that were appropriate. And it was related to the Prophet ﷺ, and it was related of the Prophet ﷺ that the Prophet ﷺ used to come and visit us it was by one of the companions here, by Anas ibn Malik, that one of the Prophet ﷺ used to come and visit us, and I had a younger brother who was called Abu Omer, and he had a sparrow that we played with, but that sparrow had died. And so one day the Prophet ﷺ came to see him and saw him grieved, and he asked, what's happening with him? Is he what's wrong with him? Is he all right? And the people replied that his sparrow has died, his bird has died. And then the Prophet ﷺ had said to the child Abu Omer, that what has happened to your little bird? Like, he expressed actual concern, like, where people would oftentimes be able to see that, that, oh, it's just a kid, like, oh, that's, we'll just get him a new one, or that's just a toy, that's just this, and just kind of dismiss. The Prophet some said in kind of a jest, one, like, he kind of calling the child by his nickname, but also being able to show, kind of come to his level and being able to kind of sit with him in this space, not necessarily making a joke of the child's loss or of the child's bird or anything like that, but in a way of just thinking of how he's being related, of sitting with that child, and in a way of trying to help that child grieve, but while at the same time recognizing the loss, not saying how, like, oh, your bird died, well, go find another one, or like, anything like that, but to be able to inject a little bit of dignified lightheartedness in a situation, but at the same time, it's with the underlying sense of a deep sense of care and compassion for the community and for someone who is has experienced a loss, whether that is a child who's lost his pet, or if it's something even more significant. But just thinking about how the Prophet ﷺ, was cognizant of the feelings of a child and not turn the blind eye to someone who society would easily just dismiss, but to be able to dignify that child's loss while at the same time being able to, broach the situation in a way that was not very stoic or monolithic or off-putting, but was something very invitational and inviting. And thinking about in what ways we can also tailor this to the places and spaces that we may be tending to or needing to care for. In what ways can we also not necessarily make a bad joke in a place or inject humor that doesn't belong in the space, but be able to read a room. The Prophet ﷺ was able to read that room, be able to see that this, the child is grieving, the child is sad, and how to be able to through this type of situational awareness and emotional intelligence, be able to approach this delicate situation. And so having that aspect of emotional intelligence, of situational awareness, of being able to be mindful of your community members and their needs, and being able to then approach in this instance. And so as the Prophet ﷺ did in this case with a sense of lightheartedness. The additional thing that the Prophet ﷺ would do would be building connection and offering positive reminders to other people. Prophet ﷺ, with respect to his care and concern for other folks, he would lift up, especially for people who are grieving, that you see, in the context of how one companion related that the Prophet ﷺ had come to a woman who had been weeping for her deceased child, and who knows for kind of how long in the sense, but had said to her that recall on Allah, remember Allah, and be patient. Continue to be patient. That the Prophet ﷺ, himself, as somebody who witnessed the death of his children, only one of his children had outlived him, had survived past him, and someone who had experienced not just the death of his children, but some of his spouses, some of his closest friends, his relatives, all these people experienced so much loss in life that you would think that he's not somebody who's coming in this situation and being unmindful of what that feels like. The Prophet ﷺ himself was someone who would shed those tears, would feel grief, would experience grief, would have all these different ways of just encountering difficult situations. And so to think that he's just dismissing someone else's experience without actually having felt that is very important for us to remember, that he's coming from this from a place of empathy, but also he's drawing on that important lesson that he comes to someone who, again, think about on in that society's time, but also in our context, could be marginalized, could be dismissed easily, and being able to express those those heartfelt feelings, but also being able to say a good and positive reminder for that person, that not just building a connection, that if the process wouldn't just come to this person because they're a stranger in this sense and be able to just offer these regards, but the process built genuine connections with his community members to a variety of different degrees, but at least to a space where he could come to them and approach with them, sit with them, and offer them something that would be of consolation and of benefit. The third thing that the Prophet would lift up is recalling on faith, as here, and the trust to put into Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be able to lift this up, that we think about how previously the Prophet has gone to this woman and offered this consolation to her, but thinking about in the same aspect how in certain times of trials, times of tribulation, one's faith can get really shaken. One's faith can get really shook. One can ask, how did Allah allow this to happen? Why did Allah allow for this person to be lost? How could this even have happened? Why this person? Why this? And the Prophet ﷺ, being that anchor for his community, that not only helped his community steward these times of difficulty, but also being a time of a reminder, a time of us not to lose that focus or shake in our faith, but to be able to lean into our faith, to deepen our roots in our faith, especially in the face of certain trials. And there is an example, as the Prophet has lifted up, as has been lifted up about the Prophet in the Quran where in Surah Tawbah it's related he reassured his companion, do not worry that Allah is certainly with us, that to not fear, do not fear, that Allah is certainly with us, that in a moment where we could lose our faith, in a moment where we could feel like Allah has abandoned us or any of this stuff, we start to falter on our faith. The Prophet ﷺ was someone to remind his community, no, lean on your faith in these difficult times. These are the times that you actually lean into your faith. And this particular verse was in the context of the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr escaping from Mecca, hiding in a cave, during this hijrah and being pursued, but Abu Bakr worrying that they would be discovered by their pursuers, that they were just outside this cave and they're going to see us for sure if they come about. If they just look a little bit further, they're going to see us. And the Prophet ﷺ calming that person, calming Abu Bakr, giving him a consolation where Abu Bakr might be like, well, this is it. This is, we're done for this. There's no way out of this. I don't know how we're going to get past this. But yeah, this looks like the end of the road. And Prophet ﷺ being able to offer a positive reminder to Abu Bakr and saying that, do not worry. Surely Allah is with us, that we might feel abandoned. We might feel that we're on our own here, but Allah is with us here. And seeing how they're then able to migrate safely throughout and go back there. So thinking about that, our way of consoling people as we close here, as our way of approaching people, as our way of being mindful in this time in the holidays, of how, not just in the holidays, but also afterwards, of how to approach our fellow neighbors, how to approach ourselves and our closest family, to first and foremost be mindful of the different moods in the room, the different needs of people, the different emotional intelligences of different people, to be aware of what their sensitivities are, to have this awareness for their proclivities. What are they? Some people enjoy humor, some people absolutely do not. Some people have certain levels of tolerance, some people do not. And being aware of those dynamics. So our Prophet ﷺ, when he was humorous, when he lightened the mood, he didn't just do so in a situation that didn't warrant it. He did so because he was familiar with the different needs and the different levels of emotional tolerance of different people. So he was very dynamic in his understanding of people beyond just their first name, last name, and who they're from or where they're from. He knew them at a deeper level, and it's a challenge for us that in an age where we're super connected with people superficially and adding people on Facebook or following them on Instagram or anything like that, we don't know too much more about them other than maybe what they post or what they show up publicly or what their handle might be or what their name might be there. But deeper levels, what are they okay with? What are they not okay with? And we oftentimes find ourselves when we say something that doesn't rub the right way, that, oh, shoot, we shouldn't have said that. That person actually has a deep trauma about something like that, or something they really didn't appreciate that. So being mindful of that room, being able to be aware when to use something like humor to console someone, when to use another approach to be able to to console someone, but to be intelligent enough to approach that in according ways, and also to be mindful of those who oftentimes are kind of written off or put to the side. We lifted up with the Prophet some interaction with a small child and his pet, which could often be dismissed as that's not a loss, that's not something to grieve over. Get over it. We'll go to PetSmart and get you another kid or get you another pet or whatnot. And thinking about how the Prophet didn't trivialize those things, and how we also can be privy to not just the grief of other people, but the grief of others who are often dismissed or written out, whether they are children, whether they are at some levels of society. We don't discriminate in that aspect. Next thing the Prophet ﷺ had that we lifted up was his connection to other people, and always offering a positive reminder that being able to not just go to someone and offer your consolation, but to be able to go there and be able to have a genuine connection with them that enables you to go, versus like, oh, this is going to be awkward. Should I reach out to them? Should I not? He was at a level where he was able to reach out to these people and have a connection with them. And so what do we do in our situation where the only connection we might have is just on, a social media platform, but we've never really built a true connection? How do we get to a space where we can actually build a true connection? And not just that, being able to get to a space where you can then offer something positive. Because if you're still at a superficial level, you may not even feel appropriate offering anything beyond just, thoughts and prayers there. how do you get to a space where you can offer something that might be kind of like that bad medicine almost? It maybe tastes a little bit difficult, but it's actually what's good for someone. To be able to get to that level of comfort and trust, it takes a little bit of development. And so, how do we get to a space where we can not just build those connections and say prayers your way, or we're praying for you, but be able to actually sit down and, as the Prophet did with this woman who lost her child, and say that recall on Allah, have taqwa, be mindful of Allah, and be patient. To be able to say those things, which in another context, people might be like, "Hey, what are you dismissing this person? Are you not like seeing what they just lost?" But to think about the empathy of the situation, to truly be able to sit with that, but also build that connection where you can offer a deeper consolation than just thoughts and prayers. And the last thing being that recalling being that anchor in times of difficulty, in times of grief, both for yourself and for other people, that when things do get hard, when things do get difficult, when we do experience loss and we experience all these things, that we lean further on our faith, being a reminder to other people to lean on our faith, to lean on that trust in Allah, and to not abandon that. That doesn't mean we go and have a religious debate now in the midst of someone experiencing a deep loss and grief, giving them their space, but also being that fervent reminder that in such times we lean on our faith and we open our hearts in this way. And our Prophet ﷺ modeled this through all different situations, in the lighthearted sense, in the positive days, in the sunny days, also in the difficult and rainy days as well. So when we go into this time of the holidays, getting this message of profound community and purchasing and happiness and all this stuff, that we are mindful of those who are not experiencing it in this way. We are mindful not just of those who are experiencing in that way and keeping them in our prayers, but how do we go beyond that and be stewards of and kind of agents of care in our community, as our Prophet ﷺ was for his community and for all of humanity. So may Allah enable us to be a people that not just walk in the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ in name only, but allow us to walk in the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ in the element and in the way and the example of caring and consoling and in presence for his community. And may Allah enable us to do so in a way that is befitting for not just us, but in a way that allows us to be reunited with all of those whom we've walked this walk with, whom we yearn to see on that day in which we'll all be gathered. Allahumma ameen. We also want to lift a special dua for one of our sisters, a dear sister who had passed last year, was a former board member of Muslim Space and a very active volunteer, and someone whose legacy continues to shine this way and spirit continues to shine. Sister Shabana Stationwala, may Allah have mercy on her, who passed away last year, just past the 1 year mark. We want to lift up a special dua for her, because though this season is kind of emblematic in that sense, that though we have so many things to be joyous about, so many things that give us reason to be positive, reason to be smiling and enjoying our time with our family, we recognize the grief that we may be experiencing now. We recognize the grief that Shabana's family is experiencing now, in having these times, but not having her there. And we ask Allah to not just elevate her rank and her station in the next life and in Al-Jannatul Firdaus, but also to continue to bring comfort to all those who knew Shabana, all those who loved Shabana, all those who were there around her, and enable us to continue to lift up that spirit that she left behind, the spirit of volunteerism, the spirit of care for other people, the spirit of care for those whom we might not have been able to see, the people who she recognized the needs for that we may have not been witness to, or we may not have given their due care to. That Shabana Stationwala was truly someone who lifted up an example of care and compassion for her community and for the people around her, whether she knew them or she didn't. And this is a perfect walk in that aspect of the Prophet's care and example of care and community leadership. And may we all be enabled to follow that and continue to not just be able to continue to give these things to the fellow community, but in a way that continues to bless this sadaqah jariyah, this continuous charity of leadership, of example that Shabana has laid behind and left behind for all of us. But we ask that you keep her family and all those who knew her, all those who will come to know her through their continued volunteerism and our continued connection to other people in different ways. May Allah keep them all in your prayer as well, and may Allah continue to preserve, continue to comfort, and continue to allow us to have the strength to do those things that we have promised to continue to do, but also to allow for her example to continue to be here for us, for those who come after us, and for all those who will be benefited, who have come already before us. Inshallah. Allahumma ameen. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Our Lord, please accept this humble service for us, for thou art all hearing, all knowing. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.